The crystalline walls of the Grand Tribunal chamber stretched upward for what seemed like miles, refracting light from distant stars into patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Marcus Reeves stood alone on the circular platform at the chamber's center, hands clasped behind his back, while 700 different species watched from tiered seating that spiraled up into shadow. Some of the observers had too many eyes. Others had none at all. A few existed as clouds of luminescent gas contained in transparent suits. They all stared at the human, with mixtures of curiosity, fear, and rage. High above the chamber floor, suspended in a sphere of crackling energy, the High Arbiter Valthorn presided over the assembly. The Arbiter's true form was impossible to perceive directly. Ancient ceremonial armor contained the being's energy, giving it vaguely humanoid shape, but light bent wrong around the edges. When Valthorn spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Human Marcus Reeves, Ambassador of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council to answer for crimes unprecedented in the history of this assembly. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The platform beneath his feet displayed holographic images of Earth's solar system, rotating slowly. Home had never seemed so small or so far away. The charges, Valthorn continued, and every screen in the massive chamber lit up with the same information. 4 months ago, the Korthon Dominion dispatched a subjugation fleet to Earth under Council Law 7 Alpha. 9,900 warships. Standard protocol for bringing primitive species into the fold of civilization. Marcus almost smiled at that. Primitive. 8 months ago, humanity had been confined to one star system. Now they stood accused of destroying an armada. The fleet reached Earth's solar system and initiated contact protocols. Valthorn's voice carried weight that made the air feel heavy. 47 hours later, only 47 ships returned to Korthon space. The rest vanished. The holographic displays changed, showing grainy footage of battered warships limping through a jump gate. Their hulls were intact, undamaged by weapons fire, but something about them looked wrong, empty.
Ow.
Nearly 10,000 ships. Valthorn let the number hang in the air. 4.7 million Korthon soldiers. Gone. The crews of the 47 ships that returned are broken. Their captains refuse to speak. Medical examinations show their memories intact, but their minds have suppressed what they witnessed. Deliberately. They chose to forget rather than remember what happened at Earth. A massive creature in the lower tiers slammed 4 fists against its podium. Brasshorn, warlord of the Korthon Dominion's 5th Fleet, rose to his full height of 12 feet. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished metal, and his voice rattled like grinding stone. This human species committed an act of war. They destroyed our fleet through treachery, through weapons that leave no trace. Brasshorn pointed one massive arm at Marcus. Earth must be sterilized before this plague of violence spreads. Murmurs of agreement rippled through portions of the assembly, but Marcus noticed other species remained quiet, watching with careful interest. They wanted to know how humanity had accomplished the impossible. Valthorn raised one armored hand, and silence fell like a curtain. Ambassador Reeves. Sensors detected no weapons fire. No energy signatures consistent with military engagement. No debris fields. No distress signals from any of the missing ships. The Arbiter leaned forward, and Marcus felt the weight of that ancient attention. What weapon did your species unleash? This was it. The moment Marcus had been preparing for during the entire 3-week journey to the Council homeworld. He took a slow breath and met Valthorn's approximation of a gaze. We didn't use a weapon, High Arbiter. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in hundreds of languages, their translation devices creating a cacophony of overlapping accusations and demands. Valthorn raised both hands this time, and the noise cut off as if someone had severed its throat. Then explain, the Arbiter said quietly, how 9,900 ships simply vanished. Marcus allowed himself a small smile now. They didn't vanish. They're still out there, operating, thriving, actually. He paused. They just don't belong to the Korthon Dominion anymore. The silence that followed felt different than before, confused, uncertain, a delegate from the lower tiers. A being that resembled a mantis the size of a small vehicle spoke up. You claim to have captured the fleet. Impossible. Earth has fewer than 300 vessels total. We've reviewed your military capacity. We didn't capture them, Marcus said. We gave them a choice. Prosshorn's laugh sounded like rocks in a grinder. A choice? You gave soldiers a choice? They follow orders. That is their purpose. That's what we thought you'd think, Marcus replied. He gestured to the holographic controls on his platform, and new images appeared. Which is why we sent one ship to meet your fleet. Unarmed. A diplomatic vessel. We invited your officers aboard for negotiations. One ship. Valthorn's voice carried a note that might have been curiosity. Against 9,900. We didn't need more. We weren't fighting a battle. Marcus pulled up another display. We were offering something your empire never gave them. Before he could continue, a commotion erupted near one of the Korthon seating areas. Guards were escorting someone onto a lower platform. The being moved with a shuffling gait as if each step required immense effort. Its exoskeleton was dull, unkempt. One of the Korthon survivors, Valthorn, gestured toward the newcomer, Slagtier, former third officer of the Dominion warship Relentless. One of the few who retained enough mental coherence to attend this tribunal. The Arbiter's voice softened slightly. Tell the Council what you witnessed at Earth. Slagtier's voice came out broken, words scattered like dropped marbles. They came aboard, humans. They talked to us, showed us things, images, sounds, concepts we had no words for. The Korthon officer's whole body began to shake. They showed us what we could have been, what we should have been. They showed us ... The officer collapsed, trembling. Medical personnel rushed forward, but Slagtier kept whispering the same phrase over and over. They showed us ourselves. The assembly watched in uncomfortable silence as the broken officer was carried away. Marcus felt a pang of sympathy. He remembered meeting Slagtier on the Pandora, watching the realization dawn in those alien eyes. The moment someone discovered they'd been robbed of their entire life, Valthorn turned back to Marcus. What did you show them, Ambassador? Marcus straightened his shoulders. We showed them what they'd been missing. What the Korthon Dominion took from them before they were even born. He activated the holographic display one more time, and a single image appeared. A ship. Sleek, small, utterly unremarkable, except for the name printed on its hull. The Pandora. Wait. We gave them a gift. Hi, Arbiter. We showed them freedom. The chamber fell silent again. But this time, the quality of the silence was different. Dangerous. Intrigued, Brasshorn's voice rose to a roar. Lies. Propaganda. My people are loyal. They would never betray the Dominion. Marcus turned to face the Korthon warlord directly. They didn't betray the Dominion. They freed themselves from it. He looked back up at Valthorn. And if the Council wants to understand what happened to those 9,853 ships, I'm prepared to explain. But you need to hear the whole story, starting from the beginning. Valthorn considered this for a long moment. Finally, the Arbiter nodded. Then speak, human. Tell us how your species turned an invasion fleet into deserters, with nothing but words. Marcus took a breath and began. 3 months before the Korthon fleet arrived at Earth, we knew they were coming. 3 months before Marcus stood in the Grand Tribunal chamber, Dr. Elena Rivera sat in the Deep Space Monitoring Station Galileo, staring at a display that made no sense. The numbers couldn't be right. She ran the calculations again, checked every sensor twice, and felt her stomach drop when the results stayed the same. We need to call Earth, she said quietly. Right now. Her assistant, a young man named David Park, looked up from his own console. What is it? Elena pointed at the gravitational distortions her sensors had detected. There's a fleet coming. A big one. And I mean really big. She pulled up the projection, and David's face went pale. They'll reach our solar system in 90 days. A display showed 9,000. 900 distinct signatures, all moving in perfect formation toward Earth. Within 6 hours, Every government on Earth knew about the approaching fleet. Within 12, President Adeyemi had convened an emergency session of the newly formed United Earth Council. Within 24, humanity's top military minds had run the simulations and reached the same conclusion: Earth would lose. General Catherine Cross stood before the assembled leaders, her expression grim. Our best scenario gives us a 7% chance of survival. That's if we deploy every defense platform, every ship, and if the enemy fleet is significantly less advanced than we estimate. They won't be. Species that send fleets this size don't need cutting-edge technology. They have numbers. President Adeyemi, a woman who had led her nation through 3 wars before the unification, leaned forward in her chair. What about the colonies? Mars, Europa, the Titan settlements? Evacuation would take months we don't have, Krasar. Applied and evacuate where? We've had faster-than-light travel for 8 months. We haven't even mapped the nearest systems yet. The chamber fell into heavy silence. Humanity had reached for the stars and found them full of threats they couldn't handle. There might be another option. Everyone turned to look at Marcus Reeves, who had been sitting quietly in the corner. He was technically just a cultural attaché, someone who studied human psychology and sociology. Not a soldier. Not a strategist. With respect, Ambassador Reeves, Cross said carefully, this is a military matter. No. Marcus stood and walked to the display showing the approaching fleet. It's a cultural one. We've been studying the transmissions we've intercepted from these ships. Colonel Okafor's intelligence division has been analyzing their communication patterns for the past week. Colonel James Okafor, head of Earth's small but effective intelligence service, stood as well. He pulled up new data on the main screen. The fleet belongs to something called the Korthon Dominion. We've been decrypting their communications, and what we've found is ... tumbling. The screen showed translated documents, intercepted messages, and sociological analyses. Okafor continued, the Korthon Dominion operates on a rigid caste system. Every citizen is born into a predetermined role. Soldiers serve mandatory 40-year terms. There's no compensation beyond basic sustenance. No choice. They're conscripts, Marcus added. Every single one of those 4.7 million souls on those ships was forced into service. President Adeyemi frowned. So they're slaves? Worse, Okafor said. Slaves know they're enslaved. The Korthons have been conditioned for generations to believe this is normal, natural, the only way society can function. He pulled up more data. They have no concept of family. Reproduction is state-controlled. Children are taken at birth and assigned to educational facilities based on genetic markers. A Korthon soldier has never met his parents, never chosen a meal, never decided anything about his own life. Marcus watched the realization dawn on the faces around the table. We can't beat them militarily, but we don't have to, because we have something they've never encountered before. Cross asked. Hope. Marcus activated a new display. I'm proposing we send one ship to meet their fleet. Not a warship. A diplomatic vessel. We invite their officers aboard, and we show them what they've been missing. Show them what? Adeyemi asked. Marcus smiled. Everything. Music, art, literature, the concept of choice. The idea that they could live for themselves instead of the state. He pulled up a schematic of a ship being retrofitted in Earth's orbit. We load this vessel with humanity's cultural archives. We bring sociologists, psychologists, chefs, musicians, teachers. We invite Korthon officers to dinner, and we have a conversation. General Cross looked skeptical. You think we can convince an invasion fleet to turn around because we play them some music? I think, Marcus said carefully, that if we show people who have been enslaved their entire lives what freedom looks like, some of them might want it. And if enough of them want it, the fleet can't continue its mission. This is insane, someone muttered from the back of the room. President Adeyemi studied Marcus for a long moment. You're talking about cultural warfare? Weaponizing the concept of liberty. I'm talking about giving people information and letting them choose, Marcus corrected. What they do with that information is up to them. Adeyemi looked at General Cross. Your professional opinion? Cross-side. Conventional warfare gives us 7%. This plan is untested, relies entirely on unpredictable psychological factors, and could backfire spectacularly.
Oh.
She paused. But 7% isn't much better than 0. If Ambassador Reeves thinks this could work, I say we try it. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would send the Pandora to meet the Korthon fleet with a cargo more dangerous than any weapon humanity had ever devised. The truth. Marcus spent the next month assembling his crew. He needed people who could communicate across cultural barriers, who could make others feel welcome, who understood the power of shared experience. He chose Dr. Alice Whitmore, a psychologist who specialized in conflict resolution. Chef Thomas Chen, who could make food that made people weep with joy. Musicians, artists, historians, philosophers. 40 people total. They loaded the Pandora with everything that made humanity human. Music from every culture. Films showing families, celebrations, protests, revolutions. Books about freedom, democracy, individual rights. The ship's galley was stocked with ingredients to prepare meals with actual flavor, actual variety. The common areas were designed to feel warm, welcoming, comfortable. What if this doesn't work? Dr. Whitmore asked Marcus the night before they launched, what if we just make them angry? Marcus looked out at Earth, hanging beautiful and blue in the viewport. Then we've lost anyway. But I don't think we will. I think we're going to break their hearts. And then they're going to get furious at the people who stole their lives from them. He turned to face his crew. All 40 of them gathered in the common room. In 3 days, we're going to meet an invasion fleet. We're going to invite them to dinner. And we're going to give them the most dangerous thing in the universe, a choice. Some of them will reject it. Some will be too scared. But some, he smiled, some will choose freedom. And that's all we need. The Pandora launched the next morning, a small, armed diplomatic vessel flying straight toward an armada that could crack planets. On board, the crew prepared for the most important dinner party in human history. Behind them, Earth held its breath and waited. The Pandora drifted in the void between stars, surrounded by the Korthon fleet, like a single white blood cell in a sea of metallic giants. Marcus stood in the ship's small observation deck, watching warships the size of cities maneuver around them. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could reduce Earth to asteroids. 9,900 of them, and the Pandora had nothing but words. "They're hailing us," called David Park from the communications station. "Audio only. Should I put it through?" Marcus nodded, and a voice filled the Pandora. It sounded like metal scraping against stone, filtered through translation software that struggled to keep up. Unidentified vessel. You have entered the engagement zone of the Korthon subjugation fleet. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded for processing. Resistance will result in immediate vaporization. Marcus picked up the CUM unit and spoke calmly. "This is Ambassador Marcus Reeves of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. We're here to extend an invitation."
Alex.
"Then explain. We know why you're here. You've been sent to subjugate Earth and bring us into the Korthon Dominion."
Als.
Marcus kept his voice friendly, conversational. "Before you do that, we'd like to invite your command staff to dinner. Let us show you Earth's hospitality. After all, if you're planning to destroy us, the least we can do is feed you first." More silence. Marcus could imagine the confusion on whatever passed for the fleet commander's face. This wasn't in their protocols. Primitive species were supposed to surrender or die fighting. They weren't supposed to invite their conquerors to dinner. Finally, the voice returned. "You wish to negotiate terms of surrender?" "No," Marcus said. "We wish to have a conversation. Share a meal. Show you what Earth has to offer before you make your final decision." He paused. "Surely there's no harm in that? One dinner. If afterward you still want to subjugate us, we'll be right here." Dr. Whitmore touched Marcus's arm, her expression concerned. This was the moment everything could fall apart. If the Korthon commander refused, if he simply opened fire, the plan died here. The voice came back. "I am Warlord Brashorn, Fleet Commander. Your request is ... Unusual, but acceptable. I will send a delegation of 50 officers to assess your intentions. If you attempt deception, your world dies. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Understood, Warlord. We'll prepare the dining hall. And Warlord? No weapons necessary. You'll find we're not a threat. 20 minutes later, a Korthon shuttle approached the Pandora. The human crew gathered in the airlock, nervous but determined. Chef Thomas had prepared a feast using ingredients from 6 continents. Musicians had their instruments ready. The ship's common area had been transformed into something between a dining hall and a cultural exhibition. The airlock opened, and the Korthons entered. They were tall, nearly 8 feet on average, with exoskeletons that seemed to grow naturally from their bodies. No two looked quite alike. Some had 4 arms, others 6. Their faces were difficult to read, but their body language screamed tension. They carried weapons, despite Marcus's words, and moved in perfect military formation. The lead Korthon stepped forward. I am Bonespeaker, Primary Tactical Officer. We are here to assess your surrender terms. Marcus smiled and extended his hand. The Korthon stared at it for a moment before cautiously reaching out. Their hands clasped briefly, and Marcus could feel the being's strength. One squeeze could crush human bones. Welcome aboard the Pandora, Marcus said. Please follow me. Dinner is ready. The Korthons followed him through the ship's corridors. Marcus noticed them looking around, taking in the artwork on the walls, the soft lighting, the warm colors. Earth ships were designed for people to live in, not just work in. The contrast with Korthon military vessels must have been stark. They entered the dining hall, and several Korthons stopped walking. The room was filled with the smell of cooking food, real food, seasoned and prepared with care. Soft music played from hidden speakers, something classical and soothing. Tables were arranged in a circle, with chairs sized appropriately for both human and Korthon physiology. Please sit, Marcus gestured. We've prepared a variety of dishes from Earth. We weren't sure what Korthon biology could process, so there's a wide selection. The Korthon sat slowly, weapons still in hand, clearly expecting a trap. Human crew members began serving the food, explaining each dish, encouraging their guests to try different flavors. Bonespeaker picked up something that looked like seasoned chicken. He examined it suspiciously. Korthon soldiers consume standardized nutrient paste. Flavor is inefficient. Try it anyway, Marcus encouraged. Inefficient doesn't always mean wrong. The Korthon took a bite. His eyes, multiple and compound, widened slightly. He took another bite, chewing slowly. Around the table, other Korthons were having similar reactions. Some reached for second helpings immediately. What is this? Bonespeaker asked, his voice different now, quieter. Food, Marcus said simply, prepared with care, with spices, with flavor, with the intention of bringing joy. He paused. On Earth, sharing a meal is how we build relationships, how we show respect and affection. It's not just fuel, it's culture. While they ate, Dr. Whitmore began showing holographic displays. Images of Earth. Families gathered around dinner tables. Children playing in parks. People at work in jobs they had chosen. Couples dancing. Artists creating. Scientists discovering. A Korthon officer, smaller than the others, asked, "This is permitted in your society? These individuals decide their own activities?" Not just permitted, Marcus replied. It's our foundation. Every human from birth is taught they have the right to choose their own path, to decide what matters to them, to pursue happiness. Happiness, Bonespeaker repeated the word as if tasting it. We have no direct translation for this concept. Dr. Whitmore leaned forward. It means contentment, joy, the feeling of living a life that matters to you, not someone else. The meal continued, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. Korthons began asking questions. What was music? Why did humans have families? How did they choose their professions? The humans answered each question, showing videos, playing songs, sharing stories. One human, A musician named Rebecca Torres picked up her violin. "May I?" she asked. At Marcus's nod, she began to play. The music filled the dining hall, something soft and melancholic. Several Korthons stood up, their body language suggesting alarm. But they didn't leave. They stood frozen, listening to something they had never experienced before. When Rebecca finished, there was silence. Then Bone Speaker spoke, his voice rough. "That sound, it created a sensation in my neural centers. Discomfort, but also something else." "What was it?" "Beauty," Rebecca said softly. "Art. Something made not for utility, but for its own sake." For the experience of it, Korthon in the back of the room made a sound like grinding gears. It took Marcus a moment to realize the being was weeping. Bone Speaker stood abruptly. His hand went to his weapon, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he turned to Marcus. "What you have shown us, these concepts, this way of living," he paused, struggling with words. "We cannot unknown this. We cannot return to what we were knowing this exists." "You don't have to," Marcus said quietly. "You can choose differently. Choose." Bone Speaker's whole body seemed to shudder. "We have never chosen anything. Our roles were determined before birth. Our lives scripted by the Dominion. And you tell us this is not how all species live." "No," Dr. Whitmore said. "Many species have freedom, self-determination, the right to decide their own fate." Bone Speaker looked at his fellow officers. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication. When he turned back to Marcus, his posture had changed. "Our fleet has 4.7 million souls. You offer this choice to all?" Marcus felt his heart race. This was it. The moment everything hinged on, every single one. "Humanity offers asylum to any Korthon who wants freedom. We'll help you establish settlements. Teach you how to live for yourselves. All we ask is that you don't destroy our world. You would shelter us from our own government." Bone Speaker's voice rose. "You would trigger war with the Dominion? With the Galactic Council itself?" "We already did that when we refused to surrender," Marcus replied. "Might as well make it count." Bone Speaker reached for his communication device. Marcus tensed, ready for the betrayal. But the Korthon officer's next words changed everything. "I must inform Warlord Brasshorn. He must see this." Bone Speaker met Marcus's gaze. He must be given the same choice. Warlord Brasshorn boarded the Pandora 6 hours later with 200 of his highest-ranking officers. Each one was a veteran of countless subjugation campaigns, soldiers who had served the Korthon Dominion for decades. They entered the ship with weapons drawn and suspicion radiating from every movement. Marcus greeted them at the airlock. Knowing this was humanity's last chance, if Brasshorn rejected what they were offering, the warlord could order Earth's destruction with a single word. But if he accepted, if he truly understood what freedom meant, then everything changed. "Warlord Brasshorn," Marcus said, keeping his voice respectful, "thank you for accepting our invitation." The warlord towered over Marcus, his exoskeleton scarred from dozens of battles. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Bone Speaker's report was concerning. "He claims you showed him concepts that have no place in military operations. I am here to determine if my officer has been compromised." "And let me show you the same things," Marcus replied. "Judge for yourself." The dining hall had been reset, the tables laden with fresh food. But this time, Marcus had prepared something different. As the Korthon officers ate, clearly surprised by the experience of actual flavor, he began showing them Earth's history, not the pleasant parts, not the celebrations and families. Instead, Marcus showed them humanity's darkest chapters. Holographic displays filled the room with images of slavery, of oppression, of people forced to work against their will, bought and sold like property, denied basic rights. The Korthon officers watched in what might have been confusion. "Why do you show us this?" Brasshorn demanded. "Do you think showing us your species' barbarism will make us merciful?" "I'm showing you this," Marcus said quietly, "because we weren't always free either. For thousands of years, humans enslaved each other, forced each other into roles based on birth, on appearance, on arbitrary classifications. We told ourselves it was natural, necessary, that some people were meant to serve while others were meant to rule. He changed the display, now showing the abolition movements, the civil wars, the protests and revolutions, people fighting, dying, sacrificing everything for freedom they had never known. How many died? Asked a Korthon admiral named Stonecaller. How many of your people perished to end this slavery? Marcus met the admiral's multiple eyes. Millions. Over centuries. But their sacrifice meant their children lived free, that their children could choose their own paths, could live for themselves instead of for masters. He showed them more. The civil rights movements, women fighting for the right to vote, to work, to decide their own futures, workers demanding fair treatment. Every struggle humanity had endured to break the chains of oppression. We know what it's like to be told you don't deserve choice, Dr. Whitmore added. To be informed your role in life is predetermined and unchangeable. And we know what it takes to break free from that lie. Brasshorn stood, his massive form radiating tension. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he removed his command insignia, the symbol of his rank in the Dominion. He held it in one massive hand and stared at it. I have served the Korthon Dominion for 87 years, he said, his voice heavy. I was taken from my birth chamber at age 2 and placed in military conditioning. I have never known my genetic mother, never chosen what to eat, never heard music until today. He looked around at his officers. I have conquered 12 star systems, subjugated 47 species, and I believed this was my purpose, my nature. He closed his fist around the insignia, crushing it. I was wrong. The other Korthon officers stirred, some making sounds of agreement, others of alarm. Brasshorn continued, Return to the fleet. Tell the crews what you have seen here. Tell them everything. Every Korthon will be given the choice these humans speak of. Warlord Stonecaller protested. The Dominion will see this as treason. They will send oversight fleets to reclaim us or destroy us. Then they will fail, Brasshorn said simply. Because I learned something else from these humans today. I learned that freedom is worth fighting for. Over the next 72 hours, the Pandora became the center of the largest cultural revolution in galactic history. The Korthon fleet's communication networks buzzed with activity as soldiers shared what they had learned. Marcus and his crew hosted rotating groups of Korthon officers, sessions showing them more of what they had been denied. Music, art, the concept of family. The idea that work could be fulfilling rather than just mandatory. The possibility of choosing a partner, raising children, pursuing interests that had nothing to do with military service. On the third day, Brasshorn called a fleet-wide vote. Every Korthon would see whether to continue serving the Dominion or to defect and accept Earth's offer of asylum. Marcus watched the results come in, his hands shaking. Out of 9,900 ships, only 47 voted to remain loyal. The rest, 9,853 vessels, chose freedom. But there was a problem. Long-range sensors just detected something, David Park reported, his face pale. The Dominion Home Command has dispatched an oversight fleet, 1,200 ships, heavily armed. They'll be here in 11 hours. Brasshorn stood next to Marcus, studying the sensor data. They come to reclaim deserters. Standard protocol is immediate execution for all involved. He looked at the human ambassador. If we proceed with this defection, there is no returning. We will be at war with the Dominion and likely with the Galactic Council itself. Marcus thought about Earth, about his planet full of people who had just avoided one invasion only to potentially face another. But he also thought about the 4.7 million Korthons who had just tasted freedom for the first time. He extended his hand to Brasshorn. Welcome to the rebellion. The Korthon warlord grasped Marcus's hand, careful not to crush the fragile human bones. We will need to learn how to fight for ourselves rather than for the Dominion. How to defend rather than conquer. We'll figure it out together, Marcus replied. Then he smiled. Besides, I have a feeling the Dominion is about to learn something important about people who fight for their freedom. They're a lot harder to beat than people who fight because they're told to. The next 11 hours were a blur of activity. The Korthon fleet repositioned, forming defensive formations they had never been trained in. Soldiers who had spent their lives following orders now had to learn to think for themselves, to fight for something they actually believed in. When the Oversight fleet arrived, they found not an invasion force ready to submit to discipline, but an army of free beings ready to defend their choice. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. Soldiers fighting for freedom fought with an intensity the Oversight fleet couldn't match. After 3 hours, the Dominion forces retreated, and word began spreading through the galaxy. The Korthon subjugation fleet had defected. All of them. And they had done it because a primitive species called humanity had showed them something that Dominion never could. Hope Marcus stood in the Grand Tribunal chamber once more. Having just finished explaining everything that had happened, the silence in the vast space was absolute. 700 species sat frozen, trying to process what they had just heard. Finally, Valthorn spoke. You claim that 9,853 Korthon warships joined humanity? Defected from the Dominion entirely? They didn't join humanity, Marcus corrected. They freed themselves. We simply gave them information and let them choose what to do with it. He pulled up a holographic map showing 12 star systems. They're currently establishing independent settlements on uninhabited worlds that Earth has ceded to them. Building cities. Learning to farm. Starting families for the first time in their history. The Korthon delegate from the Dominion, a replacement for Brasshorn, who now led the free Korthon settlements, rose to his full height. Lies. Treachery. You corrupted loyal soldiers with your primitive propaganda? Is it treachery to offer people truth? Marcus asked calmly. To show them alternatives to the lives they were forced into. You had no right to interfere with Korthon internal affairs. You had no right to invade Earth, Marcus replied. But you did anyway. We just responded with information instead of weapons. Valthorn raised a hand for silence. Show us proof. Show us these defectors living their new lives. Marcus activated the playback he had prepared. Thousands of testimonials from Korthon soldiers, now civilians, appeared on screens throughout the chamber. They spoke of learning to cook, to play music, to raise children. Former military officers now worked as farmers, artists, teachers. They described the experience of choosing a name, of selecting a partner, of deciding what their life would mean. One recording showed Bone Speaker, the first Korthon Marcus had truly connected with, standing in a settlement on a green world. He was teaching young Korthons about Earth's history of freedom struggles. Behind him, Korthon children played instruments, their natural coordination making them remarkably talented musicians. I spent 60 years serving the Dominion, Bone Speaker said in the recording. I conquered worlds. I followed orders. I existed, but did not live. Then humans showed me what I had been denied. Now I teach others, and I do it because I choose to. That choice makes all the difference. The former warlord, now working as something like a mayor in the largest Korthon settlement. He spoke directly to the camera, his voice carrying the weight of experience. The Galactic Council can attempt to reclaim us, but they will find we learn more than freedom from humanity. We learn to fight for it. We learn that a being defending their right to choose is worth 10 beings following orders. He paused. We will not return to slavery. Not ever. The recordings continued, hundreds of them, each showing Korthons embracing their new lives with an intensity that was almost painful to watch. These were beings discovering joy for the first time at 50, 70, 90 years old, when the recordings ended. The chamber remained silent. Then a delegate from the lower tiers spoke up, a being from a species Marcus didn't recognize. Its voice was soft but carried clearly. We are the Talvix Collective. Our species is bound in service to the Heltheran Empire. The delegate's body language suggested fear. Is this freedom you speak of available to others? Could humans perform similar diplomatic missions to our worlds? Before Marcus could answer, another voice joined in. Then another. Within minutes, representatives from 14 different species were asking Earth for help. Some were enslaved. Others were oppressed by rigid caste systems or authoritarian governments. All of them had watched the Korthon transformation and wanted the same choice. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species condemned Earth for destabilizing the galactic order. Others saw opportunity for alliance. Still others recognized the threat. If ideas of freedom spread, their own power structures might collapse. Valthorn stood, and energy crackled around the Arbiter's ancient armor. Order. This council will maintain order. The noise subsided gradually. Valthorn looked down at Marcus with what might have been respect or might have been concern. Ambassador Reeves, you understand what you have done? You have not simply defended your world. You have planted the seeds of revolution across the galaxy. Marcus nodded. We didn't intend to start a revolution. We just wanted to survive. But if showing people the truth about freedom causes revolutions, maybe those systems deserve to fall. The Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Then Valthorn turned to address the full assembly. The Council faces an unprecedented situation. Earth has committed no act of war. They destroyed no ships, killed no Korthons. They merely shared information. Yet the consequences of that sharing have destabilized an entire empire and inspired unrest among dozens of species. They must be punished, shouted one delegate. They must be celebrated, countered another. They must be contained before this spreads further, demanded a third. The debate raged for hours. Marcus stood quietly through all of it, letting the council argue among themselves. Finally, after what felt like days, Valthorn called for a vote. The result was split nearly down the middle. No clear consensus for punishment or reward. In the end, the council reached a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but avoided outright war. The decision is rendered, Valthorn announced. Earth is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council with full diplomatic rights and protections. However, they are hereby restricted from conducting what this council terms cultural contamination operations. No further diplomatic missions designed to encourage defection, revolution, or systemic change in other species' governments. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. They wanted Earth to join the club but stop sharing the ideas that had saved them. Typical political compromise. Earth may accept this judgment or reject council membership entirely, Valthorn continued. What is your response, Ambassador? Marcus thought carefully. Rejecting membership would leave Earth isolated. Accepting meant working within a system designed to maintain the status quo. But it also meant having a voice, having protection, having a chance to change things from the inside. Earth accepts provisional membership, he said. With one condition, the chamber stirred. No one made conditions to the council. We will not actively recruit other species to defect or rebel, Marcus continued. But we will not refuse asylum to any being who asks for it. And we will not hide what freedom looks like. If others see how we live and want the same, that's their choice. Not ours, not yours. Valthorn considered this. Acceptable. But understand, Earth, that this path you have chosen will make enemies. Species whose power depends on control will see you as a threat. They already did, Marcus replied. That's why the Korthon fleet came. We're just better at dealing with that threat than they expected. The formal session ended, and delegates began filing out of the chamber. But as Marcus prepared to leave, 14 representatives approached him quietly, away from the main crowds. They represented the species who had asked for help earlier. A Talvex delegate spoke first, its voice barely above a whisper. The council has restricted your official operations, but information still spreads. If we were to learn more about Earth's culture, about your concepts of freedom and choice, would you refuse to share? Marcus smiled. We can't actively come to you. But if your people happen to visit Earth, happen to experience our way of life, happen to learn about individual rights and self-determination, he shrugged. That's just normal cultural exchange. The council can't prevent that. The delegates looked at each other. One by one they nodded. Marcus returned to Earth 3 weeks later, landing at the newly expanded spaceport in Geneva. President Adami was waiting, along with General Cross and Colonel Okafor. Did we win? Adami asked. Marcus looked at the star charts displayed in the command center, showing request after request from species wanting to establish embassies on Earth, wanting to send students to human universities, wanting to learn about democracy and freedom and choice. We did something better, he said. We gave them hope. The rest is up to them. That night, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the Earth orbital station, watching the Pandora being refitted in the shipyard. The vessel that had prevented a war through dinner and conversation was being prepared for another mission. It had been renamed the Pandora II. Its destination was marked on the star charts, the Talvik's homeworld. Officially, it was just a cultural exchange mission. Unofficially, the Talviks had requested the same gift Earth had given the Korthons. Marcus knew there would be consequences. Powerful species would push back. The Council would monitor Earth closely. But he also knew that once people learned freedom was possible, learned that choice existed, that knowledge couldn't be unlearned. The Pandora II launched the next morning, carrying teachers, artists, chefs, and philosophers. Its cargo hold was filled with Earth's cultural heritage. Its mission was simple: show others what they'd been missing in orbit above Earth. The 9,853 Korthon ships that had chosen freedom maintained a defensive perimeter, not as conquerors, not as servants, but as allies who remembered what it meant to be given a choice. And across the galaxy, in secret meetings and whispered conversations, other species began asking the question that would change everything. If the Korthons could choose freedom, why couldn't we? The revolution Marcus had started with one dinner party was just beginning. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5